listening to the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
Welcome to the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Dave Ross alongside our general manager, Mark Dominik, on a Monday. Mark, great to be with you. I know some people, myself included, having football withdrawals a week later after the Super Bowl. How is it for you as an exec? Do you finally get to exhale a little bit and kind of get into that postseason mode? But I know as execs, you guys are always gearing up for what's next on the agenda.
Yeah, you don't really, not a lot. Like it did feel like bizarre that we didn't have a game yesterday. It feels like the Super Bowl was like 2 or 3 weeks ago already, not even just like a week and a day. It feels like it was like at least 2 weeks ago we saw the Super Bowl. So maybe that's a good thing. Maybe my clock is spinning forward enough where it's like, hopefully, if things move faster. But the unique thing is, once the season gets over, that's where I got a chance to start diving into college guys. And so here we go, right? Starting to look at the prospects, starting to look at, the top guys and start to work your way down the list of, what they look like, because during the season, I spend so much time just watching NFL games, watching, matchups, things like that I really don't have a chance to really dive into. I'll see the college games on Saturday, but not the tape work. Not when you actually get to sit there and break down a guy for a full game or 2 or 3 or 4, as you kind of get an opinion of what they look like, what they feel like. And, an amazing thing is, in a week from today, the combine's already beginning, right? The NFL combine flying in. I mean, we're a week and a half away from watching guys work out on, national TV, running 40s and vertical jumping and all that stuff. So the offseason ran right into the end of the regular season, and it's really no stop. I mean, again, talking to clubs, they're all finishing up their draft meetings this week to get ready to go to the combine next week. And so clubs are very busy right now. And it's not just the draft meetings. I think a lot of people get lost in that. Like, well, it's the draft. We're gearing up for the draft. No, the pro personnel departments are very active right now. They're having their own free agency meetings in terms of looking like who could become available, who's going to get cut, what's guys going to be available via trade, or what's going to be a salary cap casualty. So we're looking at that as well as the free agency landmark, and then look at your football team and say, what can we do? Because when you get to the combine, you could have a conversation maybe with an agent accidentally about what might you want to do in those kind of situations. Or at least invite an agent into your organization and say, hey, I'd really like to talk about the players that you have that are on our football team. And then let the agent decide if he wants to, throw any names out or anything like that. So, all that busy work is going on behind the scenes in terms of getting ready. So even though there was no football this Sunday, all you're doing is watching tape right now.
Hypothetical conversations that could be happening out there here as we get ready to really get that off-season calendar going here for the NFL. And by the way, we'll get to some of those draft prospects at the end of the program today that you've detailed and give some breakdowns on. So I can't wait to get that conversation. We had mentioned this time last week, Mark, we thought it was a formality that Kellen Moore would eventually be the head coach of the Saints, but that it didn't happen right away. And I started to go, ooh, could things change a little bit? It got done, I believe, on Wednesday of last week. Was it just a formality to make sure the contract was right and dotting all the I's and crossing the T's?
Yeah, I think somewhat formality. Dave, I think there was more to that. I mean, I think there was some negotiations still going on. I think there was a pushback from Philly saying we can try to see what we can do here. And there was a push from New Orleans going, we can't afford to walk away now, right? So now who has the leverage? The coach does. And so I think maybe a little bit of that leverage was played, not to an ugly standard or anything like that, but just more like maybe a little bit better contract language, maybe a few extra $100,000, maybe some off-season or some regular season incentives could be placed into that contract. So I think that's why it took a couple more days than you would think, right? Because if everybody kind of went to bed on Friday knowing that no matter what happens on Sunday, Kellen Moore should be our head coach on Monday, shouldn't take 3 days to get there. So a couple things must have been tweaked a little bit to finally get to the point where we filled all 32 spots and Kellen Moore is the last head coach hired in the National Football League.
Yeah, so it is official. And now I guess the next question would be, Mark, now that he's a first-time head coach, obviously been a coordinator in Dallas and the Chargers, and obviously with Philadelphia this year winning the Super Bowl, who's his quarterback? He was, I guess, non-committal. Like, Derek Carr is a quarterback. He is a starting quarterback in this league. Can you make a change like that with a guy that's under contract that you inherit? Because obviously Kellen Moore wasn't there. Derek Carr's been there a couple seasons. What do you make of that situation? Is it something you can easily move on from, or the contract makes that dicey?
I think there's a couple things here. I think the contract does make it dicey. It doesn't help that New Orleans is in by far the worst salary cap space of anybody in the National Football League. And so every time you make a roster move to release a player, there's more dead cap coming to you, right? Dead cap space that you might hit. Dead cap, I can explain real quick to people that may not understand.
Yes.
Let's say we did a 5-year deal, right, Dave? And I signed you to a 5-year, $50 million deal. Congratulations.
Oh, I'm in. Where do I sign?
Well, I'm signing $50 million a year, so I got you on a bargain. So let's say 5 years. Let's make this easy. So each year is $8 million of your salary, right? So 5 times 8 is $40 million. And I give you a $10 million signing bonus, right? So now, after year 2, I've decided that, Dave, you are terrible. I have to see you were completely. I should have figured that out after day 1, but it took 2 years. And so we got this sense of like, all right, so the first year you got $10 million signing bonus and you got $8 million in salary. So you made $18 million. The second year, we made $8 million. The third year, you were going to make $8 million, but no, you've been cut. Now, the problem is when I give you the $10 million signing bonus, I take $2 million and put it each year. So year 1, $2 million in terms of the way I do accounting. So I go $2 million, $2 million, $2 million. So 5 years, I've got $2 million. So in theory, when you're looking at your salary cap, your actual cap hit is $10 million per year. But now when I cut you after year 3 or after year 2, there's still $6 million. If you remember, $2 million, $2 million, $2 million, that no one's accounted for. And so that becomes back to your cap, depending on how you cut the player, but that becomes dead cap. So what that means is it's cap space to use on a player that's not there anymore, or it's dead money. And so that's where the New Orleans Saints have gotten themselves in a little bit of problem here when they look at these contracts. So when you think about the Saints and like, will Derek Carr be the quarterback? You got to kind of look at what the dead cap impact would be. And then what's the other option you're going to go with, right? Because I think that's it. I don't think it's Spencer Rattler. I just don't think that you're going to go, okay, we got Spencer and we're good to go. I think, do you look at the draft? Do you look at a lesser expensive option? Possibly. When I look at the big picture, and knowing Carr and, his personality and Kellen Moore, I think those two can work out. So I would lean towards, I think he's there. I think Kellen Moore is playing the very safe. He is a starting quarterback and not wanting to like automatically just anoint him the starting quarterback for the Saints in 2025.
I would just say I appreciate the contract. I didn't expect to get cut after year 2, but it happens in the world. It's real business. But that's the monetary implications that would come from cutting a Derek Carr, to your point. And then all of a sudden it's going to be dead cap money for a team that's already strapped there financially. You might be stuck with Derek Carr in a lesser term. I know they won't look at it that way, or they won't profess it that way publicly. They're going to say, no, we're excited about having Derek Carr. So you might have to try to see if you can make that work. I guess it didn't work in the end for Aaron Rodgers in New York with the Jets. And we talked about this last week, that he is going to no longer have his services required for the JTS at the Jets. Now that it's official, and there's odds markets out there, DraftKings and the like, of where he might end up, what do those conversations look like, Mark, for GMs, head coaches, looking at Aaron now? Because now they don't have to worry about the Jets, because the Jets have already kind of said, hey, you're done here. Is it just talks with Aaron? Is it with the reps? Can you get him on the cheap? How does that work out?
Yeah, so until he actually hits free agency, you can't talk to anybody. You're not supposed to, Dave. Keep cheating the system. You are at the combine having conversations again with people you're not supposed to. It's right now, I think you're doing a lot of internal conversations. You're talking to ownership. Like, why would this be a fit for us when it wasn't the fit for the Jets? Like, why would this be a fit for us? What's the personality we're bringing to the building, with all the TV he does outside of it, which is fine. Right? You've got to understand, what do you think he has left and how many years is it in terms of, you hate to say it, but the bridge, but you're also thinking the bridge can take you to, the playoffs and maybe better. I know it's been miserable for the Jets and that whole situation, how it all played out. I still think Aaron has it in him. I still think he's got a year or two at least in him if he wants to play. And I think that he does. I think, there's been reports of whether he wanted to leave the Jets or would like to have stayed. We'll see. And I've seen some of the things that you talked about with DraftKings, like the landing spots. Dave, if he lands in Minnesota, then this world's messed up. Like, you cannot leave the Packers, go to the Jets, and then end up in Minnesota as a quarterback. It's illegal. I'm just going to say right now, no, we can. So, Aaron, I don't think the Vikings are going to be in it, but if they are, it's a no. Oh my God, no, don't do it. So, no, I mean, I think he plays, and I think it gets really interesting because as we see, other clubs are trying to figure out what they're going to do in the short term and looking at this draft for the long term.
I by the way, for people that are not picking up your inference on Brett Favre, that's exactly what Brett Favre did, right? To do the exact same route that Favre did, if you're Rodgers all these years later, would be bizarre. But what is kind of crazy is the Vikings are the fourth betting choice at plus 550 to end up in Minnesota. I mean, this would be Yogi Berra deja vu all over again if the same exact pathway happened. I don't see why that would work out as a marriage. But, when Favre did do it, since you made the comparison, I think people didn't look at Minnesota and think, oh, this team's right there. They're on the cusp. And then all of a sudden, Favre takes them in year one to the NFC title game. Like, is it that far-fetched? Because I don't think people saw that then. That Aaron Rodgers, wherever he goes, really all of a sudden turns back the hands of time like Favre did after that bad year with the Jets. And then could Rodgers do that too and all of a sudden end up in a title game, whether it's the AFC or the NFC?
I mean, I think so. I mean, you saw what Sam Darnold did there with where the Vikings ended up the season, right? The 5th seed and, a disappointing loss to the, Detroit Lions. But there's a lot of talent on this Minnesota team. And now you get another free agency, you get another draft class in there. Yeah, I think so. But I think it'd be more of a landing for maybe the quarterback they have that's hitting agency than I would think that you go from outside the building and reset the entire organization. To me, that's not logical to do for Minnesota. I think it's more logical to going to do some kind of money or some kind of situation. I think you'd want to kind of go with the people that already understand the system and have been in the system for a year or two.
You floated it out there, not just floating it out there to float it out there, but because from a GM's perspective and other people now nationally are kind of taking on to what you said, which is, the Rams could be a fit, right? If they didn't want to pay the big money to Stafford here, and then you move on. Like, that's still in play. These are the options and the tentacles you were talking about, right?
Yeah, and the Rams kind of have a little leverage here. You got a Matt Stafford who's got a very affordable contract right now. So maybe somebody who feels like, I don't want to go into an open bidding against Matthew Stafford, maybe they'd give up a draft choice to pull Matthew Stafford from the Rams. And that way they get sole negotiating power with Matthew Stafford instead of saying, hey, look, we'll wait for the Rams to make a move. And if they cut him, they cut him. Then everybody gets to go in. I think that, if somebody's really interested, I think a draft Rams way, and then you start to tie the picture together with Aaron Rodgers.
7-1 out there in the marketplace here. You were on that a long time ago before anybody else. All right, let's talk about some other possible superstars moving. Travis Kelce, could he be done? That's next year on the GM Shuffle.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
We are back on the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Dave Ross alongside Mark Dominik here. And Mark, it's tough when you lose. And Travis Kelce, the Chiefs haven't lost very often. But, this time a week ago, it was day one after losing to the Eagles in the Super Bowl. And then the questions start immediately, right? Like, what's the future of this team going to look like? What do they have to do to make sure they're back in this spot? Does that begin and end with Travis Kelce at tight end? And I think we all realize he's probably going to be a Hall of Famer one day. I don't think we're going out on a limb there. But he did the podcast with his brother, Jason, who's already retired. And if you're reading body language into it, I don't want to say it was a defeated man, but it was a guy that saw he was at the end of his playing days and coming to the grips and the reality of what it takes, and this, what it actually takes to be at an elite level as an athlete for as long as you have been, and what that really means at this stage to try to do it again. What do you make of the headspace of where Travis Kelce is? And do you think in your heart of hearts he goes back to KC for one more year?
Yeah, there's a lot to digest there, right? He gets to talk to his brother about what life was about. And for Kelce, it was probably bittersweet, right? To watch the Philadelphia Eagles go and win a Super Bowl. It's like, I would have liked to have had that opportunity again, right? And so uniquely positioned there. Again, there's so much potential marketing money to be made for those two, right? You could put them on the sideline, put them on the screen together. You certainly the podcast and the interest they would have. There is a lot of things to explore as your Travis Kelce, and I agree with you. The gold jacket's inevitable. He's going to put that gold jacket on one day, and you could start the clock because we make them wait 5 years for whatever reason, which I still don't really fully understand. But that's another podcast, some other. But I in my heart of hearts, I think he loves. I think he loves the attention. I think not in a bad way, but I think he loves it. I mean, I feel like it's like if Taylor Swift is doing an Eras tour, then, I think we'll see Travis Kelce do an Adios tour, right? Like, this is my last year, and kind of announce it ahead of time so that it's not like some surprise that, fans, everybody kind of gets a sense like this is the last time, this is the last go round. Because I think there's part of it that Taylor Swift likes. I think there's part of it that Travis Kelce likes in terms of the attention and the notoriety of what that all means. But at the same time, I don't think the typical fan does understand, especially where Travis is getting in terms of years, how much work it is to get your body ready to take the beating that you're about to take. And you've got to remind yourself, he's had a fairly healthy career for the guy that has this long. You have 60 more years to go, hopefully, right? 60. And so a lot of times I think fans are like, oh, he's going to give it up a year too soon. Well, he's thinking about the 60, 61 years he's got left to live on this earth to figure out, how do I want to feel? And so I think that's what he's going through his brain. And I think that's a perfectly normal thing. It's rare and it's amazing where a player gets to be in control. Jason was in control of his career. He said, I'm done. He held on for 1 or 2 more years. And then he's like, I'm done. I'm out. And he got to choose. So many times in the National Football League, we tell you, or whatever, the team tells you, because I got fired too, right? That's how this whole thing works. You don't get the last laugh. You don't get the last say. And so when a player has the opportunity to do that, you got to appreciate it and let them know that mentally it is a big hurdle. But in my heart of hearts, I think Kelce does 1 more year.
Yeah, you're so right, though. Like, very few, like a Tom Brady, get to go out when they want to go out, or you go back to the John Elways, when it's like not everybody gets to go out on their terms. Sounds like he's got that opportunity this year to still decide if he wants to go out. But I get the sense from you that was more of a post-Super Bowl loss depression type conversation with his brother. And I do wonder, you get to April, you get to May, and you've gone out with your girlfriend who happens to be one of the biggest stars in the world. And all of a sudden you go, well, what am I doing? I do want to get back to doing what I do, which is still play football. I'd be surprised if he doesn't play 1 more year. Same could be said, I guess, for Russell Wilson. Some people thought, and these are more storylines, Mark, that you and I are going to discuss here in the months to come leading up to the 2025 season. Where are some of these quarterbacks going to end up? Like Sam Darnold, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields. We're going to have some of these conversations. We talked about it with the tentacles of Aaron Rodgers. Now that he's out there, or will be officially on the market here, where all these musical chairs stop. When you look at those conversations and those GM coaching monetary decisions, it's not just about the player. It is about sculpting the rest of the 52 around the quarterback. How much will that play into a Darnold, into a Russell Wilson, into a Justin Fields, wherever they might end up in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, I think, if you sign a Darnold, you sign, Russell, it doesn't mean you preclude yourself from drafting a quarterback. If the right quarterback falls to where you're sitting in the draft, even in 2025, because you understand that, with Russell, you're not sure how many more years he's going to want to play.
Right.
And with Sam Darnold, I don't know if you want to extend yourself long-term on a 5-year deal with Sam Darnold. I don't know if there's that team out there that's going to do that. So it might be a smaller window where you appreciate having Sam in there. And if he plays great. And if you draft a quarterback in this draft class and you sign Sam Darnold to a 2 or 3 year deal, and in 3 years from now, Sam Darnold's like made the quarterback sit on the bench because he's been so good, I don't really care if you drafted a quarterback and he's sitting on the bench still. Like, I'm fine with that. Like, I think you have to have that position. As you know, Dave, it's the critical spot of any club. So, I think that those kind of things are interesting to see, but I think it doesn't really change your draft strategy. I think Justin Fields is a little different, and we can dive into more in time, but I think I think Justin Fields is going to be more of, do you want to add a package in your offense that includes Justin Fields? I don't think it's like, I'm going to go sign Justin Fields and he's automatically going to be my starter day one. I don't feel that's true, because I don't think Pittsburgh did that, right? They had him in there, and as soon as Russell was available, Russell Wilson's a starter. And even if Russell had some struggles or whatever we saw down the Pittsburgh offense, no one said, hey, let's go back over to Justin Fields. Never heard that coming out of Pittsburgh whatsoever from head coach or GM. So that tells me, Justin is more of, to me, as his potential in this league to be one of those players like a much more explosive Taysom Hill, right? That kind of a package that we saw, that you could come up with packages for Justin Fields and you could make your offense even more explosive, especially if maybe you had a little bit more of a pocket type of passer, where now you can add this whole weapon, and when you bring him in with the team that he still can throw the ball, but he can run too. So I think those are all interesting. Kirk Cousins is another one we can get into as time goes on, but certainly there's a lot of teams that, or not a lot, but there's certainly enough teams when you talk about 6 to 10 teams that are looking in the quarterback realm right now. That is a lot, considering that what the options are out there for them.
Yeah, it is. It's that musical chairs. They're going to get scooped up here pretty soon. You go to the draft route for some of these guys too. And we've seen examples of it that you're alluding to, like Tom Brady, famously Jimmy Garoppolo, and Jimmy really never saw the field opposite of a suspension for a phone gate, whatever, a deflate gate, all that stuff. Remember back in those days, right? So we've seen this before. Even Ben Roethlisberger at the end of his time in Pittsburgh, and they draft Joshua Dobbs. He's like, it's not my job to get him ready. Josh never worked out in Pittsburgh. So you see Baker Mayfield, maybe that's going on right now in Tampa Bay. They go, yeah, we gave him a smaller deal, and now it's working out pretty darn well. Maybe we're not looking at the draft as much. So fascinating that these older veterans trying to hold on to those spots, like we've talked about here in a couple spots. Cooper Kupp's trying to hold on to a spot. It's not going to be in L.A., and we know the Rams want to move Cooper Kupp. Didn't look like anybody really bit at that news. Hey, he's available for a trade. Cooper actually put that out there, and I think the Rams might have resented that a little bit. What do you do now? Once that news gets out, does that lower that trade equity, if you will, by knowing that you want to move on from the player? Now do you just wait, Mark, and see if the Rams cut him, and then we'll go get him, and we don't have to take the cap hit like the Rams do?
Yeah, I think that's what's going on, right? I think people kind of looked at it. The Rams kind of gave that sense like, hey, we'll eat a bunch of the salary if somebody wants to give us something, because you know what happens? If the Rams cut him, they eat all the salary. So the Rams are like, we'll take anything, and yet no one wants to like put themselves out there a little bit for absorbing some of Cooper Kupp's salary. So maybe the Rams weren't willing to do enough. But whatever it is, more than likely what we'll see really quickly early, because again, it's out of respect to Cooper Kupp, like we'll see with other veterans, that they'll move or they'll make the decisions fairly quickly, whether it's a June 1st designation where you can roll some of the dead money over to the next year. So you don't absorb it all this year. That's a possibility, but I think you'll just wait to see Cooper Kupp hit free agency as soon as they cut him, probably in very, very early March, right when free agency starts. And then voila, he's out there and he's able to negotiate with all 31 other clubs and find a home. The one thing that's happening is, the Rams have probably given clubs permission to talk about a trade. And so what I would have done if I was a GM and I had interest in Cooper Kupp is I would be pretending I'd be wanting to trade. So I could tell the league office and tell the Rams, can I talk to Cooper Kupp? All the while I'm trying to set up what the deal could look like and move on with him once they cut him. So there's a chance to be recruiting him legally right now instead of the behind the scenes tampering situation that other players may deal with.
Yeah, because those draft fakes come into question if the league finds out about it. We've seen teams get docked for just the stuff. So it's like trying to do your due diligence, trying to do it legally so we don't get docked a pick, which could be really big, especially for a team like the Rams. They need all their picks. Debo. Kind of went through this last year with Debo in San Francisco. He wanted out. He wanted to go to the East Coast. Didn't work out. Came back to San Francisco. Maybe it didn't work out this time. Feels different this year, right? Doesn't it feel like maybe Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch are like, okay, Debo, you've been a good player for us, but we're not going to go through this again. Do you think he's still the favorite to go back to San Francisco? Do you think a deal gets done, or do you think he goes back to the bet?
I think he's going to get moved out. I think they're going to move on from Debo, whatever capacity it is. Just my gut instinct. When you look at the way they've built this football team and about to sign Brock Purdy this offseason, in my opinion, to a massive extension, you've got to start cutting costs somewhere. You can't pay every player. And because they paid Brandon Ayuk last year, it's hard to pay two receivers, a tight end, the running back, the quarterback, the left tackle. I mean, it's a lot of guys. Forget, we didn't go on the defensive side, right? It's all the talent you have there, where the money is. So you've got to make tough decisions. So it kind of seems crystal clear to me that Debo will not be in the 49ers. And I think if you were a fan who watched the 49ers or just a fan who followed football pretty hard, you saw Ricky Pearsall really kind of develop at the end of the season. A guy that, they took in the first round. I loved the guy. I thought he was absolutely a first-round pick, watching him at the Senior Bowl just tear people apart a year ago. And in college is just such a great route runner that, he had an unfortunate start, not to his fault. But when you saw the end picture, it sure looks like a receiver that you feel a lot of confidence going into 2025.
It is fascinating to see how his season began, how his season ended up. So incredible story there. And we'll find out about Myles Garrett, too. We've talked a little bit about Myles. I'm sure we'll be talking a lot more about him as the time passes. Again, he says he wants out. Now, Andrew Berry had said, no, we're not going to move Myles Garrett even for 2 number ones. I wonder if that conversation changes. And I love the fact that you pointed to, we're almost to March, Mark. Like, free agency is going to be honest before we know it. And then it's the Wild Wild West of spending. All of these conversations are going to change so much in the coming weeks here. So fascinating to see how these trade fronts look and then what free agency looks like. When we come back, what does the draft look like? I want to get start to really pick your brain a little bit about what you see, who the number 1 pick is, the quarterbacks in there, and then maybe before we're done with the show, break down some big tackles in this upcoming NFL draft. That's next. Come back with us right here. It is the GM Shuffle on DraftKings.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
We are back on the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Dave Ross alongside Mark Dominik. Mark, as we get closer and closer to the April draft, a couple months away here. First of all, as a GM, is it something? I know you look forward to it. I know you got to love it with that. It's got to be, I can only imagine you're living the fantasy of a lot of people out here that would love to be in a position to make a first-round draft pick, make a significant, maybe potentially franchise-changing pick. How much is it fun? And how stressful is it at the same time? Because obviously, as GMs, it feels like a lot of the report card on the GM comes down to the April draft every year.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. It's what you kind of live for. You right. Love Sundays, love the games, but you sit up in a box and you have zero control at that point as you watch a game unfold. It's the roster. The coaches are making decisions. And you're up there just kind of at the mercy of, where's your team and what's going on the football field. Where the draft comes around, it's, a little bit of the opposite. It's like, okay, here's your opportunity to really build the right team, right kind of guys you want in your organization. What do you need to do? How do you do it? And it's adrenalizing, right? It's not just the pick that you get to make, but is it something where you go be aggressive or you retreat a little bit to pick up extra draft choices? You got to really kind of look through all those things. So the draft is always I think the highlight for every GM, be able to sit in the draft room and make the pick on the player and say, look, I feel like we're getting the right guy here with this for the organization. And, as we go round by round, it might seem a little less sexy, but it's still very exciting, each pick. And the one thing that I think you really that maybe as you're outside, you're kind of looking in and going, okay, well, who did he check in the 4th round, 5th round, 6th round? When I was more of a GM, I let the head coach call our draft picks. I wasn't a GM who called our draft picks. I felt like the head coach should call the draft picks because he's going to be the one really working with them instead of like me calling the draft picks saying, hey, we're going to make you a Buccaneer or a Chief or whatever it was. I thought it was always important for the coach. But here's the thing. I would always sit next to the coach and listen to the other side of the phone and just listen to the excitement. And it's just amazing. It doesn't have to be the 1st round pick. It can be the 7th round pick or it can be the 5th round pick. And it's just like, you hear the family or friends in the background, the cheering, the excitement. And it's a magical time across the board because you realize that young person's fulfilled a dream to be drafted in the National Football League. And so all of that is something that we'll dive deeper to as we get closer and closer to the draft.
That's so cool because it really is. I think people forget it. Like we all look at it from either a fan base or, these are lifelong dreams that these kids are now adults, young adults, are getting to live out, and you're having the opportunity to welcome them to the league and your team. It's a great stuff. That's the stuff that I love to watch as well. When you look at the number 1 pick, and Cam Ward right now is the small favorite to be the number 1 pick, the quarterback out of Miami. Of course, Abdul Carter. I know he's lobbying that he should be the number 1 guy at Penn State. Shedeur Sanders, of course, talented quarterback, and Deion's kid, and Travis Hunter, the two Colorado players. Mark, how much of it for you does it change for need over talent? Like, wow, this guy's talented, but we already have this position covered. How much of that conversation still takes place in those draft boards?
It really does. Everybody can sit there and say, well, I'm going to take the best. I mean, every GM can sit there and go, we're always going to take the best player available on the board. That's how we're going to build this football team. Well, if you're the Ravens and you've already got a great center, you're going to just draft the next center. So you're like, well, we got 2 really great centers because that was the best player on the board. No, you do adjust. Everybody adjusts a little bit to their needs. There's no way around it. And that's how some teams make mistakes. I know I missed on a couple picks because I was thinking a little bit more need-based than I probably should have been in terms of best picture, best player. And so, and understand when you're looking at your board and you're ranking it, Dave, there's a bias in there you've got to be careful about that you're not pushing up the need over another player. So then you could get to the draft and go, hey, we need a defensive tackle. So I took a defensive tackle in the 3rd round because that was the highest rated player on the board. Not realizing the reason why he's the highest rated player on the board is because when you're going through him in the corner, you're like, well, I kind of need defensive tackle. In the back of your brain, you're like, I kind of need tackle, so I'm going to put him a little bit above. And then the draft pulls out that way. And it turns out the corner might be better. So you've always got to be careful. But no one sets their board and says, what's a good example? If the Texans are like, I'll take a quarterback in the 1st round because he's there, I don't believe that, right? That just, you can't just go around and say the Cincinnati Bengals are taking quarterback in the first round. What? So you said it somewhat accordingly. You just got to be very careful that you've got someone in there that's going to checks and balance with you, that you don't continue to kind of make that mistake. And that was something I learned, year 3, year 4 in the NFL, not year 1 and year 2, where you're more susceptible to maybe make a mistake early.
It makes you a better GM because you go through those learned experiences about exactly how to navigate the draft. Some of these coaches and GMs and owners are going to have those same decisions. When you look at a Cam Ward versus an Abdul Carter, because Abdul Carter looks like, and I know he said, hey, defense wins championships, evidenced by Philadelphia. I mean, the kid looks like, you don't want to say can't miss because they can miss, right? They can miss even at the linebacker position. Like, is that the quote-unquote safer pick, though, in Abdul Carter at 1 versus a Cam Ward, which you hope if you draft a Cam Ward, you're getting a franchise-changing quarterback. But we see the variance feels like it's more with quarterbacks than it might be with some quality defensive players.
Yeah, I mean, Abdul Carter feels like the safer pick as of now.
Right.
The things that we're going to find in a week or two are certainly, like we talked about, the NFL Combine. We'll be doing the GM podcast going into the NFL Combine next week, right? And a chance to kind of really talk about what do we all want to unpack there through our podcast in terms of like, what are we looking for? What do you do? What are some of the, the situations that players get put in? But it's such an important part for Cam Ward and for Abdul Carter in terms of the interview process. Who are these people? Like really spending time with them. And I know some of it's a little speed dating, some of it's a little bit better than that, but some of it's just the fact of like you're getting the vibe of what this guy is about. And then the medical part. I mean, that's really why you're at the Combine, is for the medical and then some interview stuff. And then, yes, we want to see what they look like in shorts as an athlete. But really, the medical is the number one piece of the puzzle that we're all trying to figure out on all these players that are getting ready for the draft. But I think, to your point, I think Abdul Carter feels like the safer pick as you sit here today. And I think as we watch this thing unfold, Dave, the Titans are going to tell us what they're going to do without even saying a word, right? If they don't mess around with any veteran quarterbacks over the next 2 weeks once we hit free agency, they are telling you they're taking a quarterback pick 1. There's no way I think that they're sitting there going, we're just going to go with Will Levis and hope everything. I mean, they're going to give us kind of an insight, so we'll get to see. But right now I have Abdul Carter as the number 1 player in the draft.
Shedeur Sanders likes to show you his watch. He's Dion's kid, and we know how the talent is there. I don't think anybody's debating that Shedeur Sanders. By the way, he's the third favorite to be the number 1 pick of the draft, plus 450. Ward 1, Carter 2. Is he the ceiling player that you go? Maybe the ceiling is higher than a Cam Ward, but maybe the floor is lower. Like, do we worry about the variance because of the pedigree, because of his Dion? But to me, if you're looking for pedigree, there's never been a more talented corner that we've seen than Deion Sanders. You make that argument, right? So wouldn't I be willing to roll the dice that the kid can be anything close to dad? It's a risk worth taking.
Yeah, it's a different part of the football team, right? It's the quarterback. It's the franchise. It's everything. And, for as much as Deion fully understands how big of a business the National Football League, and that it is 100% of a business, which is why he wants some control too over where maybe his son goes, because he understands some businesses are run differently in the NFL out of the 32 clubs than others. So he understands it's a business. I am kind of surprised they haven't treated it that way, to the way I thought they would. Meaning, Shedeur, having a camera following him around the East-West Shrine game, and Shedeur doing Zooms with teams, and his dad calls in and wants to talk to the organization. No one else does that. Shedeur with the huge chain that says, Shedeur. It's all these things sitting there going, you're not treating it like it's a TV show and not the National Football League. And I get it. We are in the entertainment business. The NFL is entertainment. I mean, that's why people want to watch, because they get so excited about it. But it just seems a little surprising to me that Shedeur and Deion would not kind of temper down a couple things a little bit to make sure that maybe they are in more control of what happens and how it plays out. Now, we will see. And again, I've never met Shedeur Sanders, so I don't know. I've watched his videos, probably like you have in interviews. I've never met him in person, so I can't say whether I'd fall in love with him, want to hug him, or if I'd be like, I don't know about this dude, right? Same with Cam. I haven't had a chance to really spend time with Cam yet. So those two players I want to see, but we're certainly going to learn a lot about them over the next couple of weeks.
We know about his Colorado brethren. Travis Hunter, of course, wins the Heisman Trophy. We know now he's going to go to the combine as a corner. Is that a money decision that as a corner, his stock would be higher? And we're assuming he's going to be a one-way player in the NFL, not a two-way like he was in college. Is that because that position, not to say you can find receivers off trees, but it feels like maybe that's more of a watered-down elite position, whereas corner, they're really hard to find. And if you find an elite one, you get paid accordingly.
Yeah, I think you're right. Spot on. I think it's a cornerback is the Sauce Gardners of the world are just like, wow, when you get one, how do you feel? What does it do for your whole defense when you can find a shutdown outside perimeter corner? It's a big, big deal. Yes, you want wide receivers too, but the cornerback position, certainly finds its money. It's getting paid well, maybe not to the level of where the wide receiver one is, but the desirability is so much bigger that I think that's a logical choice. And will Travis Hunter ever play some offense? I think he will. I think you could see him like do some Charles Woodson kind of opportunities where you maybe throw the ball down the field or make a play. But this is when you play in the NFL, the play both ways and any time of a maximum amount of snaps is basically just too hard on your body. Now that we're at 17 games and everything. So I think he's making a good business decision by going to cornerback.
Yeah, man, we've seen it, right? Dion even played a little wide receiver at the end of his days there in Dallas, and Jerry had made that stipulation. But, it's a lot of it. You get some chunk plays out of it, but really you feel like he's going to be a corner at the next level, and that's where you're really going to want to slot him for whatever team gets there. Kellen Moore, very quickly in the last minute before we take a break here. Is there anything on tape that you're looking for that you haven't already seen at the college game, like a flaw, or are you saying, no, I know about the skill set, now I want to meet the person at the combine?
Well, I still want to, I think the unique thing here is the private workouts, the ability to watch him throw an NFL ball, the way the ball spins out of his hands, the velocity, you got a sense of where the release point is. You get a sense of his timing, but the anticipation is something you're still trying to dig into and try to get a sense of. And so, it's not just the interview part, but in some of these interviews at the combine, you're able to bring in videotape and talk to the player about what they see and what they saw. And so that's going to be a big part of it. The mental part for Cam Ward, just like any quarterback, is going to be a big part of trying to decipher where you put him on your board.
So, of course, we just did a whole segment and talked all about the star players, the big corners, and the quarterbacks. And like, when we come back, how about the big nasties up front, Mark, and get some grades that you like in some of these guys? We'll do that next year on the GM Shuffle.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
Dave Ross, Mark Dominik, back here in the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. And Mark, we're going to give an education to those listening today because you've been there, done that. You know what it's like to build a board as we get ready for the April draft, right? And so if you don't mind, kind of taking back that curtain a little bit so people see how you build your board. Because people talk about the horizontal board, the vertical board. How do you do it, Mark? Like, what's the technique that you use if you're there, whether it's Tampa or elsewhere, to say, all right, guys, here's the board. Here's how we build it. What's the day one stuff?
Yeah, Dave, this is something I've thought about since I was a GM. That it would be kind of fun to actually create a segment on a podcast, which I appreciate doing it with you, about how you do put together a draft board and what is the process that comes together so that on draft day, my son could come in and draft for the football team, or my daughter, or something like that, because it's kind of set that way where it should, somewhat. And we'll go through this process. But stacking a board or putting a board together is a long process, right? I mean, you think about how it starts off in the fall. You do a preliminary board in December. You do another board early January. You do another board right now. Then you do one after the combine. Then you kind of set your final board in mid-April is when you kind of set the final board. The best way I can say that as you get into it deeper, because again, first you're just plotting guys all over a big board in terms of where you think they could go. And what we did in Tampa, not after year 1 or 2, but after year 3, I thought an important part would be is don't just give me the grade of the player, but kind of give me a sense of where you think what round they're going to go in, right? So if let's make it very simple. Let's say you have a 7's an all-star, 6 is a starter, 5's a backup, 4 is, a camp guy, right? Well, if you think you've got a 6 and you're saying, but I like him in the 3rd round, probably something doesn't make sense, right? So it would be a way for a scout to check some out. Like, I think he's more of a top of the 2nd or mid-2nd. Okay, that might make more sense, or maybe in a bottom 1st. So it's a way to kind of make sure that you're slotting your board as a scout the correct way, getting guys on the board. Then for me, and I think what we'll kind of do here as we kind of unpack the draft a little bit slowly and really kind of work through maybe the first and second and possibly third round at the most, while we got to do this all the way to the draft because we have some weekends to go or weeks to go, is then you look vertical stack, right? And you kind of look at the vertical stack of every position, whether it's, defensive line, cornerback, quarterback, receiver, and you want to get your vertical stacks correct, right? You want to say, okay, this is my favorite. Let's go offensive line because we're going to talk big boys, like you said, the big nasties. Let's get who's your number one tackle? Who's your number two? Who's your number three? Who's your number four? Right? And you go ahead and do that. And then you blend over your guards and center. And so now you've got, these are my favorite tackles. But, I really like this guard better than like the fourth tackle. So now that's the better player. Now, do I have a center over here? So you slowly blend, and then you take your offensive line and you blend it over. We would do lots of different things to be able to kind of get a sense of where our scouts were. Meaning, I would do what's called pods. And pods would be like a group of 4, let's say, offensive tackles. Put them up on the board. Everybody watches their tape. At the end, I want people to rank them according to how they like them and why and what they know about them. Obviously, we've talked about the medical. We've talked about the character. But now this is just what's the fundamental athlete position? What can he do? So we break them into pods. And then as we got deeper into the process, now I take pieces like, here's the offensive tackle, here's the defensive end, here's the corner, here's the safety. Put them in a pod. Now, let's break them apart and see how do we stack those and break those up. So it's really a process of as you break them up, because at the end, you should have a vertical stack of all your favorite offensive players, 1 through probably 125, maybe 100. And then you have your stack of defensive players, 1 through 100, let's say, to make it easy. And then you just go head to head. Favorite offensive player, favorite defensive player. I'll take this guy. Okay. Favorite offensive player that's left and defensive player. Okay, I'm going to still take the offense. Okay, then you stack and you stack it all the way down based off of how your board's set. And the only thing that changes, should change by the time your board's set for ready for round 1 is who did you take and who did everybody else take, right? But who did you take? Because if you took that starting center, well, then all the rest of your starting centers really need to fall down your board, because the reality is you're not going to draft back-to-back starting centers. And so you got to readjust it. But today, the goal is to kind of like start to stack individual positions. And really, we're just going to take some of the top guys and just kind of enjoy, my chance of being able to watch them. I haven't watched them the way an area scout should watch them yet. To be very candid, I have not watched the entire season on these guys. I've watched games. And so I usually try, ideally you watch more than that, but I'll just be candid and very, honest, truthful that I've watched 4 games for each one of these guys, give you my honest opinion of where they sit right now. And yet there's some of the challenges or some of the things that are in front of them to figure out exactly where they would stack when it's all said and done.
It's fascinating. The whole process is fascinating to me. And I know everybody out there that's, played fantasy sports like I have for decades, you go, oh, I can do this. Yeah, good luck. It's not the same way as drafting your fantasy teams and those sort of things that you guys have to do here, especially with prospects. Because as you mentioned, you're only going through, it's different from known commodities in the NFL when you're doing that in the fantasy league versus kids coming up trying to make their way and to change your fortunes as a GM. Let's talk about those big nasties that we have. And we'll look at Will Campbell, Kelvin Banks, and Josh Simmons today a little bit. So you got big-time schools here with LSU and with Texas and Ohio State. Does that pedigree right off the top, when you go, all right, I got SEC, I got, Big Ten, does that factor in against the smaller school guys, even though maybe you watch on tape and go, ooh, they look close? Do you kind of go, well, the talent level, who they played against is going to factor in too?
You have to factor that in. You have to. Is it fair to the smaller school guy? Maybe, maybe not, but he better dominate when you watch him. But one of the things that a scout really needs to focus on when they're doing this evaluation is who are the players that player's going against, right? Because sometimes it might be an 18-year-old freshman or 19-year-old freshman versus that's a 22-year-old senior he's going against. He's playing really well. Or, has that guy got a chance to be in the National Football League, or is that guy just kind of like a guy that's a good college player, which is perfectly fine. Same when you think about the smaller school, the way he's got to finish off blocks, the way he's got to get after people. You think of Larry Allen, Sonoma State, he just used to obliterate everybody, and that's what made the Dallas Cowboys, I think, comfortable to take him in the second round, if I'm not mistaken, a guy that went to Sonoma State. So, it's got to be dominating film. Yeah. So it's got to be dominating film when it's, I think when you're at the Ohio States, the big programs, the Michigans, the LSUs, Alabamas, things like that. certainly you're looking into it, but you're already knowing that they're playing pretty good kids.
Yeah, you knew it. I love your Larry Allen call there because he was nasty in a good way, in the best way possible for a football player and offensive line. We talked about it a lot with Cam Jurgens, right? And the new center and getting in there after Kelce and the physicality he plays with, that mentality. What have you seen on Will Campbell so far at LSU? Do you like what you see out of this big tackle?
I do. You got to decide what you want for your system, right? This guy is nasty. He is a mauler. He is very physical. He's got that personality when you watch him. I watch him, I look at my notes, but I put barroom strength. Like, this is a guy you want to be a bouncer, right? That's the way he plays. He comes off the ball and just goes inside hand placement and wants to drive you into the ground and enjoy it. He may not have the same athleticism as some of the other guys, but it's not a weakness to him. Like, his base is a little bit more narrow than your typical guy, but the way he's able to roll his hips and get his hands inside, and his punch strength, his upper body punch strength, is probably the best in this draft class when I look to it. When I watch him in the pass protection, he does have patience, which is important, right? So you watch him in his slide steps and you watch him, in terms of movement, you feel that he's patient. He doesn't extend or lunge. You always look for those waist benders when you're watching tape, the guys that kind of get themselves out of position, their head starts to drop a little bit and they get themselves back into position. He's got patience in pass pro because he understands the timing and the spatial area between he and the defensive lineman. He's a fantastic football player. As I say what I think about him, again, he's very smooth, his effort. He stays up on his feet. I love him. This is a guy, when you think about him, we call these guys syrup, right? Because all they do is pancaking people. So this guy's nickname will be Syrup for the rest of the draft because all he does is pancake people. And so it's a good spot for him. I think he could be even a right tackle too, but he could play left tackle. Yeah, he's a top 10 pick. I don't see any reason why he's not.
Okay. So and I know my mom's listening to Virginia Beach, Mom. It's not a negative. I like people that pile drive you to the ground and do it with intensity and they enjoy it. It sounds like what you're seeing from Will Campbell. I like that in a left tackle or right tackle. Kelvin Banks, let's talk a little bit about Kelvin coming out of Texas. We know the pedigree down there as well. What have you seen on tape here to say whether or not you think this is a legit first-round pick?
Yeah, Kelvin Banks is going to be a legit first-round pick. I have no debate about that at all when you just watch him. He's got a great size. Like, he's just got length that you would love for. Athletic, long, he can really engulf people. He's got good bend in his back. What do I mean by that, right? Bending in your back. So think about when a defensive lineman comes after you and they bull rush you. How do you drop your ankles and how do you handle that absorbing bull rush? Some of the guys that don't have bend in their back, you see them start to walk back on their feet. They start to get out of control. And if you can't anchor in college, you're not going to be able to anchor in the NFL. It's the number one thing for me to watch. If you're watching college players play, you've got to see, can they anchor against big bull rushes? They don't have to do it every time, but you got to watch how can they do it, and can they drop the weight in their back? Because that's where they take on so much pressure that when they bend back, and that can you kind of get your feet back underneath you, get that inside grip, and kind of be able to recontrol the situation. He does that. He's a little bow-legged when you watch him, but he goes out in space. He's got a really great base when you watch him move around. But his length, he can engulf people because he's so big that he just, as you watch him in his pass protection, I think he is a left tackle at the next level. As I watch him, I love him. His frame, both his upper and body and lower body are very proportional, which you like to see. You don't like to see the really skinny legs or the really fat torso, like the pear-shaped body or anything like that. So he's got good balance between those two. This guy's a first rounder, no doubt.
I only have a minute to go, so I don't want to shortchange South Simmons out of Ohio State. You win the national championship. Again, what do you see out of Josh on tape that's going to get those executives excited?
Yeah, the unfortunate thing, the people that know Josh Simmons know he tore his knee, right? And so he didn't finish the season. It shows you a lot that Ohio State obviously has a lot of really talented offensive linemen. For him to not be there and still have the best they've had. Excellent feet, great size, fluid, mirrorability. Love his hand placement, tenacity. This comes down to the combine. This comes down to the medical and where the doctors are, where you're comfortable with him. I know his agents come out and said good things about him in terms of him being back. He should be back in time for the regular season, but that's a big blow. You've got to take that risk. As a GM, you've got to decide, can I take this guy? Because here's my opinion. If he was 100% healthy, he's the number one tackle in this draft class. I think he's better than Jack, and I think he's better than Kelvin. But because the medical, until we get a little bit more information on that, I temper that a little bit. So I've got him as my 1A, and as a guy that should go, but because the medical could push him down the board a little bit, but his skill set is as good as anybody in this draft class. So I love Josh Simmons in this draft class. Love him. Watch and see what they say about the medical as we watch this combine unfold.
Cowboys drafting towards the end of that, into the teens and out of the teens. Maybe there before you get to the 20s. So it'd be a fit. Great stuff as always, Mark. We'll do it again next week here in the GM Shuffle.